You notice it the moment it happens. The conversation stops for a second longer than expected. No one interrupts the pause. No one fills it. Most people simply wait for the next sentence. You don't. Your attention sharpens immediately. The silence feels charged, as if something invisible has just entered the room. Your mind begins scanning for what caused it, what it means and what might happen next. You might assume this reaction is anxiety, a tendency to overinterpret quiet moments. But the experience feels more precise than that. Your attention doesn't simply wander into worry. It locks onto the pause with unusual accuracy. You begin analyzing tone, timing, and expression almost instantly. The silence stops being neutral space between sentences. It becomes a signal that something beneath the conversation may have shifted. Silence, in conversation, is usually just space. A natural pause between thoughts. A moment where one person finishes speaking and the other prepares a reply. For most people, that space carries little meaning. It exists briefly and then disappears as the conversation continues. But when silence feels dangerous, the pause behaves differently. It expands in your awareness. Instead of passing unnoticed, it becomes the focal point of the interaction. Your attention narrows around it, as if the absence of sound contains hidden information. You begin searching for subtle clues, a change in facial expression, a shift in posture, a small hesitation in breathing. The silence stops being empty and becomes a container for possibility. Something might be forming inside it. Something might have already changed. Even if nothing visible has happened, the pause feels unstable. You begin evaluating the conversation that just occurred. The last sentence you spoke, the last word they used, the tone that ended the previous statement. Your mind compares it to the rhythm the conversation had moments before. If the rhythm breaks, even slightly, the silence feels heavier. Not loud, not dramatic, just significant. And once it feels significant, you cannot return to treating it as neutral space. When silence carries this weight, your body reacts before your thoughts fully organize. A subtle tightening appears in your chest or stomach. Your attention sharpens automatically, almost like a sensor switching from passive mode to active scanning. You replay the last few seconds of conversation in rapid detail. Did the other person stop speaking abruptly? Did their tone flatten at the end of the sentence? Did their eyes shift away when the pause began? These small signals begin forming possible interpretations. Perhaps they disagreed with something you said. Perhaps irritation appeared briefly, and they are deciding how to express it. Perhaps they are withdrawing from the conversation altogether. None of these conclusions are certain, yet the silence feels like the moment where certainty might soon appear. Your system prepares itself for that possibility. Words that felt casual a moment ago suddenly require evaluation. You consider whether clarification might stabilize the interaction, whether adding another sentence could prevent misunderstanding, whether humor might diffuse tension that hasn't even been confirmed, while the other person may simply be thinking about what to say next. Your mind begins constructing explanations for why the silence exists at all. What makes this pattern difficult to notice is that it often appears logical. Conversations do contain signals. Tone, pacing, and pauses can carry meaning. People do reveal irritation or hesitation through silence. So when you feel alert during a pause, it seems reasonable to assume you are simply attentive to nuance. In some situations, that assumption is correct. Silence can indicate uncertainty, discomfort, or disagreement. But when silence feels dangerous, your reaction does not wait for confirmation. The pause itself becomes enough to activate analysis. Instead of observing what unfolds naturally, you begin predicting outcomes before they appear. Your attention shifts away from the present exchange and toward what the silence might eventually produce. The conversation splits into two layers. On the surface, nothing is happening. Beneath that surface, your mind is running rapid interpretations. What are they thinking? What might they say next? Did the silence appear because something just went wrong? This internal process is quiet and automatic. It rarely feels dramatic from the inside. It feels practical, as if you are simply preparing for what conversations sometimes contain. Because of this, silence rarely feels neutral to you. Even brief pauses can trigger subtle monitoring. You listen more carefully to the next sentence that follows. If the other person's tone shifts slightly, It confirms that the silence mattered. If their voice remains calm, you still continue evaluating the interaction. Your mind compares their response to the pattern that existed earlier in the conversation. Are they speaking faster or slower than before? Did their words become shorter? Did warmth fade slightly from their voice? These micro-adjustments may be small enough that others never register them. But when you are already alert to silence, each detail feels like additional data. You start responding to the conversation with small corrections of your own. You soften your tone, clarify what you meant earlier, add context that was never requested. Sometimes you even apologize for something that has not been criticized. From the outside, these adjustments can appear thoughtful and considerate, but internally, they are part of a system that assumes the silence signaled instability. What reinforces this pattern is that it occasionally proves accurate. There are moments when silence truly does precede criticism or disagreement. Someone pauses before explaining why they felt uncomfortable with something you said. A conversation becomes quiet just before tension appears. When this happens, the connection between silence and consequence becomes stronger in your memory. Your mind records the event as confirmation that the pause was meaningful. The next time silence appears, your system remembers the earlier moment. It prepares sooner. It analyzes faster. Each correct prediction strengthens the belief that silence should never be ignored. Over time, the system stops, waiting for evidence. It treats the pause itself as the first sign that something may be shifting. This makes your awareness feel like a skill. You are detecting patterns others overlook. You are reading subtle signals in real time. In many situations, that interpretation feels accurate enough to maintain the habit. But the cost of constant interpretation remains mostly invisible. The cost appears in how much mental energy silence begins to consume. Instead of functioning as a brief transition between sentences, it becomes a moment that demands attention. Your mind fills the pause with analysis. You track the other person's expression. You monitor how long the silence lasts. You evaluate whether speaking first would improve the situation or make it worse. Even after the conversation continues, part of your attention stays anchored to the pause that occurred earlier. You wonder whether you interpreted it correctly, whether the other person noticed the tension you sensed, whether you prevented something from escalating by adjusting your response. These questions often remain unanswered, yet the evaluation continues long after the moment has passed. A pause that lasted to seconds during the conversation can remain active in your thoughts for minutes afterward. At this stage, the experience rarely feels like anxiety. Anxiety is usually loud and obvious. It announces itself through racing thoughts or visible worry. What you experience during silence is quieter than that. It feels controlled, focused, almost analytical. You are not panicking about the conversation. You are examining it. Silence becomes the point where your attention intensifies. You begin observing more details than you were noticing moments before. From the outside, this looks like emotional intelligence. You are attentive to subtle cues. You notice when the atmosphere changes. You respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. These qualities can even make conversations smoother in certain situations. But internally, the calm analysis hides something else. The assumption that silence is rarely neutral. That assumption rarely appears out of nowhere. At some earlier point, silence stopped feeling neutral and started feeling predictive. In many environments, pauses are harmless. Someone stops speaking because they are thinking, remembering something, or simply choosing the right word. But in environments where emotional reactions were less predictable, silence could carry a different meaning. A quiet moment might appear just before criticism. A pause might precede disappointment. Someone might stop speaking not because they are reflecting, but because they are deciding how to respond. When this pattern happens often enough, the brain begins associating quiet moments with potential shifts in emotional tone. Silence becomes less about reflection and more about anticipation. The nervous system learns that the pause itself may contain information about what is about to happen next. Once that association forms, attention naturally gravitates toward quiet moments in conversation. You begin noticing the exact length of pauses, the expressions that accompany them, the subtle movements that occur while nothing is being said. Over time, this monitoring becomes automatic. You no longer consciously decide to analyze silence. Your mind simply reacts to it. The pause becomes the moment when your internal system activates, preparing you for the possibility that the conversation might be about to change direction. This is how silence slowly transforms into something that feels meaningful, even when it might not be. Your brain begins treating pauses the way someone studies early warning signs in an environment where change once happened quickly. Instead of waiting for conflict to become visible, your attention looks for the earliest hint that it might occur. Silence becomes one of those hints. It feels like the moment where something hidden could surface. As soon as the pause appears, your mind begins assembling interpretations. Perhaps the other person is reconsidering what you said. Perhaps they are deciding whether to challenge it. Perhaps they are silently withdrawing from the interaction. These possibilities arise quickly, sometimes before you consciously notice that you are evaluating them. In response, your behavior subtly adjusts. You may speak sooner than you originally intended, filling the quiet space before it grows uncomfortable. Or you may choose your next words with greater precision, trying to stabilize whatever shift you believe might be forming. The conversation continues, but it is no longer unfolding naturally in your perception. It feels managed. Each sentence becomes part of a quiet attempt to keep the interaction steady, even though the only sign of instability was a pause. What keeps this pattern alive is that it occasionally seems justified. There are times when silence truly does precede tension. Someone pauses before expressing frustration. A quiet moment appears just before disagreement surfaces. When experiences like this occur, the connection between silence and emotional consequence becomes stronger in your memory. Your mind registers the pause as the first detectable stage of a larger shift. The next time a similar moment appears, your system activates sooner. It assumes that the same sequence may unfold again, because you respond quickly, adjusting your tone, clarifying your intention, or smoothing the conversation. The potential tension sometimes disappears before it fully emerges. When that happens, the system interprets the outcome as confirmation that your awareness worked. You noticed the pause, responded appropriately, and prevented something from escalating. What remains invisible is the possibility that the conversation may have remained calm regardless of your intervention. Silence alone does not always signal discomfort or disagreement. People pause for countless ordinary reasons during conversation. Yet, when your attention has been trained to treat the pause as meaningful, neutrality becomes difficult to accept without investigation. As this habit strengthens, conversations begin to feel subtly different from the inside. Externally, everything may appear relaxed and ordinary. Words move back and forth without conflict. But internally, part of your attention remains positioned at the edges of the interaction. You are listening not only for what people say, but for the rhythm in which they say it. When that rhythm breaks even briefly, you notice immediately. A pause stretches slightly longer than expected. The other person glances away before responding. Their next sentence arrives with a slightly different tone. None of these signals guarantee that something is wrong, yet together they create the impression that the emotional atmosphere may be shifting. Your mind begins following that possibility closely. While others continue speaking naturally, you are measuring the conversation's stability in real time. The difference is subtle enough that no one else may realize it is happening. You appear calm and engaged, but beneath that calmness, a monitoring process remains active, quietly evaluating each pause and response as the conversation unfolds. Over time, this process becomes so familiar that it feels like a normal part of communication. You might describe it as sensitivity to emotional nuance or an ability to read the room quickly. In some ways, that description is accurate. You do notice details that others might overlook. You texture shifts in tone and manipulation. These abilities can make you appear perceptive and thoughtful in conversation. But what often remains hidden is the assumption beneath that perception. Your attention is not simply observing what is happening. It is anticipating what might happen next. When silence appears, your system does not wait patiently for the conversation to resume. It immediately begins preparing for the possibility that the pause represents a turning point. Even if that possibility never materializes, the preparation itself still occurs. The conversation may remain friendly and relaxed, yet your mind has already begun stabilizing something that may never have been unstable in the first place. Eventually, this anticipation becomes part of the way conversations feel to you. Dialogue is no longer just an exchange of ideas or experiences. It becomes an environment that can shift at any moment. Most of the time, those shifts never happen, but your system remains attentive to the earliest sign that they could. Silence stands out as one of those signs because it interrupts the normal flow of interaction. When words stop briefly, the structure of the conversation changes. In that moment of quiet, your attention fills the gap with interpretation. You begin asking internal questions without realizing it. What are they thinking right now? Did the previous sentence land differently than expected? Is the next response going to redirect the conversation in an uncomfortable direction? These questions arise quietly and quickly. They are not always conscious, but they guide how you respond. You might add another explanation, soften your tone, or adjust the topic slightly. Each adjustment is small, yet together they reveal how closely your attention follows moments of silence. This is where the difference between awareness and scanning becomes clearer. Awareness simply notices what is present. It observes the pause, acknowledges it, and waits to see what follows. Scanning operates differently. It treats the pause as the beginning of a potential chain of events. Instead of remaining neutral, your attention begins searching for the first indication that the conversation might turn against you. The questions arise almost automatically. Is this silence the start of criticism? Did something I said create tension? Are they reconsidering how they want to respond to me? These interpretations appear before the conversation provides any real evidence for them, yet they influence how you behave in the next few seconds. Your tone may become more careful. Your next sentence may contain extra explanation or reassurance. From the outside, these adjustments appear thoughtful and considerate. Internally, they are part of a predictive system that treats silence as a moment requiring preparation. The result is that even calm conversations can carry a subtle sense of instability. A brief pause appears, and your mind prepares for consequences that may never arrive. Your body adjusts slightly before any words confirm the need for it. Muscles tighten just enough to signal alertness. Attention sharpens, as if something important might happen next. Meanwhile, the other person may simply be thinking about their response, completely unaware that the silence has triggered an internal process for you. From the outside, nothing unusual is visible. You remain engaged, listening carefully and responding with consideration, but internally, the moment has already expanded beyond what it objectively was. A pause lasting only a few seconds has activated a system shaped by years of experience. The silence itself is not the source of danger. It is only the signal that your mind learned to watch closely, long after the environment that originally required that vigilance may have changed.